My name's Craig Little. Do you guys need another minute of quiet to get things done? I know I just did. But we're here to talk SUSE Manager, and I was supposed to have a customer sitting right up here next to me to deliver this session, but they couldn't travel. And unfortunately, I also can't use the company name, which is very unfortunate. But this is the agenda we're going to do today. We're going to talk about the customer without using names. We're going to talk about what the problem was and how we used some SUSE technology to help solve it. That's going to be our agenda for the day. So I'm one of the solution architects here in North America. I cover the strategic accounts for the West. So that's a lot of fun, big name, fun accounts, lots of problems, lots of we're better than everybody else kinds of accounts. But it gives me a chance to have a lot of fun with technology. So that's one of the things that I want to talk to you about today. So our customer profile. It is a very large multinational manufacturer of things that roll down the road with batteries. They have a ton of Linux distributions. They've got about every flavor under the sun. And we'll see a list here in just a minute of some of those specifics. They also have a large number of data centers. And so in that mode, how do you manage all of these large amounts of multiple distributions, large numbers of systems, spread out across the world with a team of 5 people? Their team literally is 5 people. When we started talking to them about it, they're going, initially, they'd purchased some SLES for SAP. They're getting ready to deploy some SAP stuff, and just in an offhand comment, we mentioned SUSE Multi-Linux Manager, and they go, what? Tell me more. And this has been a great conversation that we've had with them from this point on. This team is just responsible for the security updates only. This is a unique aspect that I had not run into before. Most of the time, the Linux team is responsible for the entirety of the operating system. The application packages, the security packages, the OS enhancement, they're responsible for all of it. And that's a question that I've got for you guys. Are you guys responsible for the entirety of the application or just a portion? Or the entirety of the OS or just a portion? So the whole OS and the applications? Just the OS pieces? Just security or all of the OS components? Okay. Is everybody else kind of in that same boat? Not application, but you have the full stack of the OS. So any OS-related patches that are in the repo, you get to take care of. Okay, these guys don't. All they're concerned with is the security updates. And I got to move that or I'm going to end up on the ground. My backpack was sitting right there. They are just responsible for the security updates, which poses an interesting issue. Because how do I only apply the security updates without interrupting what the application owners and the system owners are doing? So we'll come back to that as part of the problem statement. And then they get the security team breathing down their neck. They'll get an email and go, hey, these 85 systems, go patch them now, because they're out of compliance. Here's a list from CrowdStrike. Here's all the systems you got to go take care of by next week. Those are the kinds of requests that they were getting hit with. So that's part of what we're looking at as our overall problem statement here. So we got some SLES, we got Red Hat, Oracle, Ubuntu, CentOS, some Cent 7 that's not getting patched yet. 30,000 Linux nodes. It's just a small number of nodes. What's that divided by 5? That's a whole hell of a lot of systems that you have to keep track of. So 30,000 Linux nodes on-prem. There is some in the public cloud that wasn't counted here. So there's some additional that we have yet to kind of tackle. The breakout, predominantly Ubuntu. Again, one of the things that I'm trying to change, this is my job. I got to ask them, when are you going to convert those to SLES? But a lot of Ubuntu, a lot of CentOS, and they're all running as virtual hosts. So 35,000 virtual hosts. So it's a big environment to go take care of. Again, 40 data centers. The 7 are the ones that we're primarily concerned with to begin with. Because those are the ones that are thousands of nodes of Linux versus less than. So we're working down the hierarchy or the infrastructure to get the big hits. And then we'll extend it out to the smaller sites. So questions on the customer profile. Did you get all the scanning that you needed? Feel free. No, don't worry about it. You won't disturb me. I'm going to ask them questions. So it's all good. But any questions on the profile? Make sense? How many of you in here are fairly close? How many has got 30,000 or more nodes? How about 15? Who's 10? We got some 5,000 nodes? You got 5,000? That kind of mix from a distribution point of view, or all SLES? Please say all SLES. They're all L? Okay. I get it. A little bit. We got a little bit in there. Excellent. So, but over 1,000 or thereabouts? No, Linux total. Okay. Who's got more than 1,000? Dude, you're the winner on this one today, or the loser, depending upon how many people you have to manage that. But let's talk. Maybe we got some solutions here that might help you. Okay, problem statement. Like we talked about, many different Linux distros. So the guys that I'm working with had to know Ubuntu, RHEL, SLES, Cent, the whole gambit. They had to know all of those. Now, if you're a good Linux admin, this shouldn't be a big deal. But I've run into a number of Linux admins that get all hung up if they're trying to work on an Ubuntu system and they've never worked on it before. It's like, dude, it's just Linux. It's okay. You can go Google things and figure things out. Many locations. They had large data centers around the world. Interconnectivity, networking pieces can get you a long ways. It really can. But if I can't lay on systems, there's times that I need to. But that then turns into time zone issues, maintenance window issues, things of that nature. Security team. Literally, they showed me one of the emails. These 35 systems have to be patched by Friday. And they got the email on Thursday afternoon. I was just like, dude, give me a little bit of warning here. But they don't have a good handle on the status of their Linux environment. They don't know where it's really at. What needs to be patched, what doesn't need to be patched. So this is, frankly, the biggest pain point that we found talking to them. They don't like getting hit under the gun with having to go do work on patching these systems and getting change control and all these things out. But the corollary of that is, how do I report the compliance? How do I prove back to security I've done the work that I need to do? That those systems are in compliance. Those systems don't need to be patched. How do we get to that point? Then this piece, all they cared about was security patches. They didn't want to patch anything else in the operating system. They just wanted to get security off their back, going, I've patched all of those CVEs. I'm done. You don't need to bug me anymore. I don't want to be on the naughty list. So that's the key that they were trying to solve, and this was a subset of that. The updating security patches, CrowdStrike. They use CrowdStrike to report their vulnerabilities. This is going to, excuse me, this is going to become a bit of a problem as we got further into the project. But at the start of the project, it's like, oh, okay. And then the team does not own the systems. Back to this part where they only have the purview to lay the security updates down. They don't have the purview to create change control, reboot systems, any of those pieces. So it's an interesting predicament that they're in from that perspective. So, from a solution point of view, yes? They have root access. They technically own them, but if they take an application down, they're going to get called out hard. Yeah, Yeah, they could fix it. But again, if the application is down, they're going to get called out for taking the app down. It's that really crappy place admins don't want to be. I'm responsible for the system, but I can't do the work that I need to do in the fashion I need to do. Okay? So what we came up with is started talking to them about SUSE Multi-Linux Management. Again, it started out with a conversation, just a quick question of, well, how are you managing Linux systems? Have you heard of this that we're doing over here? And it was when we were doing their introduction to what we call SUSE Customer Center. Hopefully all of you guys are somewhat familiar with that. And we did that introduction to them, and we talked about SUSE Manager for a moment. So, of course, that is our solution set. It's the tool that manages all of the Linux distros, the only one that I know of in the Linux space without going to some odd HPE type of hardware management or some big name where they kind of manage Linux. None of them do it well. SUSE Manager does Linux, only Linux, and it does it well. So that became the start of a proof of concept that we did with them. To scale to 30,000 nodes. We only got one guy that's pushing the edge a little bit on SUSE Manager. But SUSE Manager can handle between 6,000 and 8,000 nodes per SUSE Manager server. But we do have a hub architecture that allows us to have a head server and then servers underneath of it, to where I can manage at this scale pretty quickly and easily. So it's like I said, not too many people in the room are going to need it, but you kind of file it away for when you're working for that next multinational conglomerate that's got 30,000 nodes. You can go, I got just the tool. And one of the other pieces is some custom salt states. Because how many of you are SUSE Manager users? We got a few? So why aren't the rest of you? That's my bigger question. And I've got sales guys who would love to talk to you about that. When you go turn on the update, what does SUSE Manager do for update? Somebody have an answer for that one? Nobody? It does essentially a zipper up. That's it. It wants to go dump everything that's in the repository that needs to be updated. And so that's problematic, because remember back to our original problem statement, I need to patch security updates only. So we're gonna talk about this one in a little more depth here in a minute. The last part, consistent patch sets. They have in-house repositories, but the in-house repositories don't change very often because it's essentially a single repository for the whole environment to use on a per distribution version basis. So this was the other piece. For those of you that don't use SUSE Manager or SUSE Multi-Linux Manager, there is content lifecycle projects. And the content lifecycle projects allow you to have consistent patch sets between dev, test, and production, or how many ever environments you have. So it allows you to have these consistent patch sets. And these guys, when we showed them that capability, were really going, this is cool. So now they can have their newest stuff going into dev, the more mature stuff going into test and production, and do it in a consistent fashion across all of the sites. So here's that hub architecture. And this I pulled out of the documentation because I couldn't find the pictures that we drew for them. But this is that concept where I've got a hub server with multiple SUSE Manager servers under it, and then proxy servers under that. So if you remember, actually, let's just go back there. The seven large data centers, we were going to pick like 2 of those, kind of treat them from a continent kind of perspective, to house the SUSE Manager servers. The hub server would live in one of them. And then we're going to put proxies down at the lower level sites to be able to get the content closer to those sites. Okay? So the consistent patch sets. Here's the proxies that we're talking about. Again, those will be in those smaller sites to make it much easier, keep the traffic and the bandwidth utilization low, with the servers from a geographic kind of point of view. Questions on that hub architecture? So an air-gapped, you'd be air-gapped from the server down. You absolutely could use a proxy in an air-gapped situation, but what you're air-gapping is at that server level. Do you need air-gapped? Okay, it's documented. You are going to want to have, I'm assuming you've got a tool to get data across, like what was one customer I was working with? They called it a data diode. And it's some tool that allowed them to push files through. So you've got that kind of design. Okay. Do you do Kubernetes as well? Have you done air-gapped Kubernetes yet? Good. Keep it that way. It's frickin' brutal. Yeah. But we actually have it documented. So go take a look at the docs for air-gapped installs and all of that. It's painful because you basically are going to have to replicate your registries inside. But this absolutely would work in that mode. In that case, you probably would have the hub server outside, and then, or an RMT server outside to push the data through. But it absolutely would work in that air-gapped design. There's too much data going between the proxy and the server to really treat that in an air-gapped kind of design. Any other questions on hub architecture or proxies or scaling up? One of the things to keep in mind, as you are starting to scale up a SUSE Manager server, there is a tuning guide for large implementations. It's one of the specialty documents for SUSE Manager. Take a look at it. How many are running 4.3 still? SUSE Manager 4.3? We got a couple. Are you going to continue running it past? You're getting ready to migrate. Okay, because we do offer that long-term support now for 4.3. If the migration is a bit heavy, you could buy yourself a year. But with 4.3, hey Cam, come on in. Make sure you get scanned. But on the 4.3 front, there's some great tuning, and actually it'd work for 5.0 as well, for the innards of the SUSE Manager processes. So a lot of it is Java-based, and so it's got a Java config settings to help your system run better and more efficient. So large tuning guide, even if you aren't talking the scale that we have here, it's worthwhile to go take a peek and go, oh, maybe I should up the open file handles or the Java heap memory or things of that nature. Okay, security-only patch states. Today, this is not inherent in the SUSE Manager capabilities out of the box. But we're using salt states, which are. We can use salt states. We can create all sorts of new salt states. But we went ahead and created, and this was, I worked with one of my coworkers, Patrick, to get these created. And notice, zipper, pretty easy. Zipper patch category security. That was super simple. Rel, same way. Up security. Ubuntu. Yeah, anytime I got to bust out awk, it's going to be a bad day. A little more difficult, but still doable. This was one of the key solution components that we had to pull together to be able to satisfy their requirement of security-only patches. And it's one of those things, as you're working with SUSE Manager, kind of keep in mind, I can do a lot with a salt state. And it's not terribly difficult to write. Look, what we got 3 lines of code for most of those salt states? Because this is 3 separate salt states. And it makes it super simple because I can chain that to a recurring action and have that kick off every Friday, for example, or the end of the month. The other benefit to this, if we remember back to some of the original problem statement piece, they get reports from security that says these are the systems that need to be taken care of. Their end goal, to make sure they're not on that naughty list and not getting those emails, is they've got a patch policy that says patches need to be done within, I think it was a 60-day window. So in that 60-day window, they leave it up to the application owners and system owners to be able to get the patches in. At the end of that 60-day window, these kick off. If you haven't gotten it done on your time frame, I'm doing it on my time frame. And so the app owners can go do all of those things. They can have appropriate change control approvals in. We're gonna apply security patches on this Friday. Well known, well understood, the whole world knows it. This keeps this team off of security's naughty list by allowing them to deliver those salt states in an easy, or to deliver those security-only patches in an easy way. It takes care of dependency resolution, takes care of all those pieces to be able to deliver it quickly and easily. Yes? The kernel updates, that's going to be part of change control. Because if they got to reboot it, they got to reboot it. Either that or they deliver it and then wait for the app team to pick up the reboot later. So, we've got live patch as well. It changes up the overall maintenance structure. And today they're not using any of that for their systems. Well, RHEL does. RHEL's got a live kernel. Does Ubuntu? I'm not sure on that one. But RHEL and SLES both have a live kernel capability. Right. And that's the other part of it is if uptime was super critical, we'll go down the road, we'll suggest the live kernel pieces. But I think it's more so timing of the reboot because they don't own it. They don't own the app. They're not asking for change control on part of it. You had your hand raised. You could. Yep. You absolutely could lock the kernel down to keep that from changing. And that's something you used to have to do with the live kernel patching because a lot of the tools weren't smart enough to understand. You had a live patch kernel, and they would just put the regular kernel back in over on top of it. So, but yeah, you could do something along those lines. This does a pretty solid job of getting those pieces in. But you're right, the reboot is something that they do have to take care of. Questions on what we were doing with the salt states here? Because the other bigger question is, those that are using SUSE Manager, what are other ways that you guys could use this concept to deal with categories of patches? Because it was a fun challenge when the customer hit me with this one. It's like, because most of the time you go down the road of, well, I'll just create a separate repo that only had security patches. But we really wanted the app teams to have access to all the patches. So we really couldn't go down the road of filtering. This really became a very clean approach. But are there other ideas or questions? So this is used in conjunction with the content lifecycle. So the content lifecycle, we've picked a date, and we're going to say this patch set's going to be all of the patches up to a particular date. So we're doing that part, and then we move that from a sandbox to dev, test, prod across the environments. So we are date ranging the patches. But in addition, we are just applying the security patches only in that date range. So that way, if the app teams deploy it early, ahead of the end of the patch cycle security patch deployment, they're getting the same set of updates. And hopefully they're deploying the security patches early. Because that's the end goal was, I have a way to do it if the app teams or server teams aren't doing what they're supposed to do in a timely fashion. That was their end. They want the other teams to take care of it for them. But this gives them that last stop, security patches go out, so I don't get the nasty gram on Monday from the security team kind of concept. Questions? Or, like I said, how else could this sort of concept be used? What are other ideas? Because as we started talking through this, my thought is, I would like to see this engineered up and be included in SUSE Manager and not be a set of scripts or salt states that I put in there and share with those folks that are aware. Do you have an idea or just it's good stuff? Yeah. Add it to SUSE Manager, absolutely. So, how do you get from chaos to structure? This is a big metaphysical kind of question here, but related to what we did with this particular customer. The key element we started with what are the needs? What's the problem that we're trying to solve? What is the success criteria? We want actual real metrics. You know, like you've heard me talk about, they didn't want to be on the naughty list. But that was their immediate pain. The big thing was they wanted all of their systems with security patches by the end of the patch cycle. So there's their metric that they're trying to achieve. And then we worked with them in a POC. You don't always have to do a POC with one of the SUSE sales teams, but you can do your own pilot with SUSE Manager as well. But the overall concept is those first two. What am I trying to solve? How, you know, what are the metrics? Then you can define what the pilot looks like, execute that pilot, and come out with a good solution set. So here's the other piece. How long do you think it takes to go implement a SUSE Manager environment? It truly is, to get started in that initial rollout, it's hours, frankly, if you've got change control and some of those sorts of things. But it doesn't take very long to get a SUSE Manager environment out and your systems being managed. From a pilot point of view, frankly, inside of a week, you could have that pilot in, running, and managing your test cases and managing your test boxes. It's really pretty straightforward. And in this kind of environment, which is what this timeline is modeled on for 30,000 nodes, it'll, frankly, by week 6, you should have big swaths of those data centers added into SUSE Manager and being managed. It really can be that quick to go from I'm not managing anything to I got a pretty good handle on what my Linux world is doing. So you really can get there really very, very quickly. Okay. How to do this in your environment? Where do you go look? Okay, so those of you that have SUSE Manager, have you used the docs? A lot? They're not bad though, right? They're better than some of our other docs. Have you used some of the specialty docs, like that large tuning guide, large systems tuning guide? Do look, because the SUSE Manager team is one of the better teams that we have from a documentation point of view and the special use cases point of view. So I've got links for that. Don Vosberg did an interview talking about the new 5.0. So I got the link to that interview for you to go peruse if you're not familiar with what we're doing with 5.0. A lot of cool changes. Excuse me. And then here's the link to that large deployment guide. The key element, though, is it's in this section of specialized guides. There's a number of other very cool guides in that link. So quick final question for you guys. From an environment point of view, what is your current patch policy? So what's the timeline from patch release to production systems to be managed? Because this is one, I love finding out these answers, because I've had it everywhere from like 3 days to, yeah, maybe in a year. So what's some of the examples that you guys have? Like,
depends on what environment we're talking about in our DMZ.
yeah. Yeah.
It's 2 weeks.
Okay.
That we absolutely must.
From patch release, 2 weeks to done?
Yeah, from discovery from our technical system to done.
Okay.
So that's way more. Our internal systems, we're working on more policies, but we roll through our dev test integration production systems, and we roll up within, usually it's, I believe the state time is a month.
Okay.
We're trying, we got somebody now who's going to work with us to put an actual definition there.
Kind of codify what that process is. Nice.
So, yeah, we start on, like, as soon as it's rolled out, we have it on the
Okay.
with testing.
That's not too bad. Not too bad. Because like I said, I've had 3 days to maybe in a year. Anybody else?
It depends on the security.
Okay.
For the most part, 35 days.
So normal systems, non-skiff type of systems?
That includes the 35
Okay, so 35 days. Just over, why 35? Okay. I just, in my mind, I'm looking, how do I build rules around that? And it's like, I, I don't know. That's kind of fun. You're either getting a bonus 5 days, you're getting done 5 days early, or or you're 25 days late. It's one of the two. What's your patch policy there? What was that? Oh, okay. Perfect. Anybody else?
I work for a very small organization, so I always patch it and
You patch it when you get around to it.
patch it, hold on.
Okay.
Pretty much immediately, as soon as I'm aware that
Do you have enough systems that you have a dev and prod or that kind of split?
not particularly, not anymore.
Okay. Let me ask you a quick question, because I had a specific day when I was managing systems that I would do all of my changes. Do you have a specific day?
I've thought about it, but since I'm the only systems engineer,
Okay. So personally, after having some issues getting stuff done, I chose Wednesday as my evening to go in, get all of my changes done, all my patching done. That way I had Thursday, Friday to go call people if I needed to, as opposed to Friday night and then being on a weekend not being able to find people. So if you run into that exact issue, yeah. I liked Wednesday. I had a couple of days to prep, execute it, and a couple of days to recover if I ran into major issues. But it was one of those. It was, like I said, there was a long Friday night that brought about that rule of only doing it on Wednesdays. Anybody else from a patch policy? Actually, do you have a patch policy?
today we had a rule on it, no Friday.
Yeah. but how long do you have to get patches delivered?
Back when I was doing that type of work, it would usually be, we'd start at night and hopefully by,
But when the patch was released, how many days to have production fully patched?
depends on the organization I work with, right?
Okay.
Some were more strict than others.
Yeah.
A couple days passed, and some were kind of
Yeah. Like, I've run into some, it was like, we might get it done in a year. I'm just going, you need to have more impetus than that, or more drive to get that part done. But you don't need to. Yeah. Yeah, patching, who needs it? Anybody else want to add to the patching how many days discussion? Yeah, but you still can't get it done in 0 days. It's just the vulnerability happens in 0 days. Down here, when we were talking content lifecycle, that's where that can be very, very handy. So in the middle of a patch cycle, all of a sudden a 0-day vulnerability comes in. You can add it, override the filter, bring in that newer patch, and have it be part of the patch repo and quickly run it through your dev test prod in that mode without having to really disrupt the bulk of the patch's timing. Or Linux, the live Linux or live kernel patching would do that as well. In summary, we got a major manufacturer, lots of stuff, lots of Linux distros, and 5 guys to manage it. It is the poster child for SUSE Multi-Linux Manager. With a couple of custom tweaks with those custom states, we are able to do what they needed to do of security patches only. Again, that was the very first time I had heard that request. And I've dealt with a lot of SUSE Manager and Linux management for years. But that part of it is, we don't own the rest, we don't care, this is the part we've got to get delivered. So being able to have that flexibility in SUSE Multi-Linux Manager was spectacular. So the solution, SUSE Multi-Linux Manager, custom salt states, and getting it deployed quickly and easily. The last part of it is the fact that it supported the management of all of those major Linux distros that they had. There was not one on the list that we couldn't take care of, which was, again, unique from a lot of the solutions that are out there. How to get there? Define, plan, pilot it, and get rolling. That's the biggest piece, is to go ahead and get started with it. Because with SUSE Manager, like you heard me say, you can get it up and rolling in a week, 2 weeks, especially for a smaller environment. Guys, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it. I appreciate the interaction and questions and answering my questions as well. And if you want to complain, the guy in the green jacket right here is the guy to complain to. Because Cameron, my boss, came in to join, which was spectacular. But thank you guys. I appreciate it very much. Have a wonderful rest of the show.